Right now, out in the middle of the ocean, commercial cargo ships the massive size of skyscrapers, basically, are trying to pull themselves across the water using giant flying robot drones.
Yeah, it really is a striking reality. I mean, you are looking at a massive steel hull weighing tens of thousands of tons, and it's tethered to this highly advanced autonomous drone just flying way up in the clouds.
It sounds like a scene ripped straight out of a science fiction movie, you know? But this is a very real technology currently being tested on the open sea. Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and I'm here with our maritime technology expert.
Glad to be here. And yeah, that tension between this futuristic airborne technology and the gritty reality of maritime shipping, that is the entire premise of today's source material.
Exactly. We are unpacking a deeply fascinating article from the DeepDraft desk.
Yeah.
It was published on August 10th, 2026. The piece is titled Airborne Wind Propulsion, the Missing Manual Behind the Fuel-Saving Claim.
Right, the missing manual.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore a crucial reality check in the world of green technology. We want to show you why proving a new tech works perfectly on a spreadsheet or, in a pristine computer simulation is really only half the battle.
Barely half, yeah.
Right, because the ultimate proving ground is how human beings actually operate that tech in the middle of a storm under intense pressure when things inevitably start to go wrong.
What's fascinating here is the underlying tension in the global maritime industry right now. In the rush to decarbonize our supply chains, shipping is under a massive microscope,
Oh, absolutely. Everyone is watching them.
Right. Regulators and the public, they want zero-emission cargo. But as the author of this DeepDraft article points out, shipping really should not become an easy scapegoat in the climate debate.
Yeah, because it's already a highly optimized industry, right?
Exactly. It is highly optimized and essential. They are operating under severe commercial pressures to transport the vast majority of world trade. So the industry desperately needs practical efficiency.
Practical being the key word there.
Yes. Those solutions have to operate on realistic timelines, with equipment that can be safely managed by the actual human beings who run these vessels.
So before we can critique the system the article discusses, we need to understand the specific tech we are even looking at. For you listening, we have to be crystal clear here. We are not talking about old school canvas sails.
Oh, not a...
We are not talking about like the wooden masts from a pirate movie or something from the 1800s.
No. The source material zeroes in on a very specific modern system being developed by a company called Windtrax. This is a rigid aerokite drone.
A rigid aerokite.
Right. So to differentiate it, this is not a conventional soft sail just flapping in the wind. It is not a spinning Flettner rotor column, and it's not a rigid fiberglass wing mounted permanently to the ship's deck either.
Right. It's completely different.
It is essentially a highly controlled airborne towing device.
And the launch sequence described in the article is just wild to me. It doesn't just pop up on a string like a child's kite at the park. It actually sits on a dedicated launch and recovery platform right on the forecastle, so the very front of the ship.
Yeah, right up front.
And when the ship's officer decides the weather conditions are right, they initiate the sequence. But the first phase is actually a powered takeoff. Like the aerokite uses its own internal electric propellers to lift itself off the platform.
Yeah, it flies itself into position. The goal there is to reach an altitude where the wind is much stronger and significantly more consistent than the turbulent air down at sea level.
That makes sense. The air is pretty messy near the water.
Exactly. So once the drone reaches that optimal altitude, it transitions into what the engineers call traction mode.
Traction mode, okay.
Right. So the propellers power down. They are no longer generating any thrust. Instead, the rigid wing, its control surfaces, the natural wind flow, and an automated flight path basically take over.
And it flies in a pattern, right.
Yeah, the kite starts flying in programmed figure-8 patterns. This generates immense aerodynamic pull through a highly tensioned tether that's connected back to the ship.
So it doesn't push the ship from behind like a traditional engine does. It actively pulls the bow forward.
Exactly, it's a pull.
Let's dig into the performance tables provided in the DeepDraft article, because the numbers they analyzed are highly specific and I think really important here.
They are.
So the independent assessment looked at a 50.6 square meter kite. And they simulated this kite on a laden 75,000 DWT LR1 tanker.
Right, and for context for the listener, that is a ship roughly the length of 2 football fields.
Wow.
Yeah. fully loaded with liquid cargo and cruising at about 13 knots.
Yeah.
And on paper, this drone generated a weighted average fuel savings of 5.03%.
5.03%, which honestly sounds pretty good for a ship that massive.
It is. That 5.03% translates to a net power contribution of 277.72 kilowatts. And those numbers, they matter immensely in the current regulatory environment.
Because of the emission scorecards.
Exactly. The report notes this translates to a serious contribution to a ship's international carbon emissions scorecards. Regulators use metrics like the EDI and the EEXI to penalize dirty ships and reward clean ones.
Right.
And this system gives the vessel a very favorable Fuel EU maritime wind reward factor. But if you look closely at that exact performance table, it reveals a massive variance. The savings are completely unstable.
Yeah, this part blew my mind. The table shows that if you sail that massive ship from Houston to Rotterdam, you get a highly impressive 10.21% fuel savings.
Which is huge.
Huge. But if you take that exact same ship with the exact same kite and you sail a different route, like from Lagos to Rotterdam, the savings plummet to just 2.46%.
It's a drastic drop.
To me, this is exactly like driving a modern hybrid car.
Yeah.
Your actual fuel mileage totally depends on your daily commute. Like if you drive a hybrid down a steep mountain, you regenerate battery power and your efficiency is off the charts. You feel like a total genius.
Oh, yeah, you feel great.
Right. But if you drive it up that same mountain, the battery drains in 2 minutes and you are just burning heavy gas the whole way up. Your savings are completely at the mercy of your environment.
That hybrid car comparison highlights the core problem with wind propulsion perfectly. It is not a fixed, predictable saving.
Like it would be if you just got a better engine.
Right. It's not like installing a more efficient diesel engine or applying a smoother anti-fouling paint to the hull where you just get a constant benefit.
Yeah.
As the assessment proves, airborne wind performance is entirely dictated by your heading, the season, the sea state, and the specific route.
You have to actually be sailing where the wind is.
Exactly. And at an angle where the kite can actually fill with air and pull you forward.
Yeah.
I mean, if the wind is blowing straight at the front of your ship, the kite is completely useless.
So knowing that this kite is up there successfully pulling the ship, generating at least a 5% average fuel savings without requiring a single drop of alternative green fuel, it begs a major question. Why is the DeepDraft author writing such a highly cautionary article? Like, if it works, why the warning?
Well, because the performance study has a major physical blind spot. We have to move from ideal simulated numbers to actual messy hydrodynamics.
Messy on hydrodynamics, okay.
Yeah. The technical caveat the author raises here is paramount. The study providing these fuel savings used what engineers call a simplified single degree of freedom model.
Okay, let me make sure I understand that. Does that mean they basically just measured the forward pull of the kite against the forward power required from the ship's engine? Like just a straight line on a graph?
That's exactly it. It is a one-dimensional calculation, forward thrust versus forward resistance. But a ship navigating the ocean does not move in just one dimension.
Right, it's bouncing all over the place.
Exactly. The simulation completely neglected sway, roll, and yaw. And most importantly, it did not account for the hydrodynamic resistance induced by the wind propulsion itself.
Wait, the wind propulsion causes resistance?
Yes. Consider the physics of that tether connecting the drone to the forecastle. If the tether force is not pulling cleanly and perfectly along the center line of the ship, it creates something called leeway.
Leeway?
Yeah. It basically pulls the nose of the ship slightly to the side.
Okay, I want you listening to think about walking an incredibly strong, heavy dog on a leash. If that dog is walking perfectly straight ahead of you on the sidewalk, it's great.
It's helping you along.
Right. The dog is actually pulling you doing some of the work, and you walk faster with less effort. But if that dog sees a squirrel and starts pulling hard to the side, like diagonally into the street, you have to lean back, twist your body, and drag your heels just to stay on the sidewalk.
You're fighting it.
Exactly. You are fighting the dog's sideways momentum. And that physical struggle actually costs you significantly more energy than if you had just left the dog at home and walked alone.
And the mechanics are absolutely identical for a merchant ship. If the kite pulls the ship off its intended track, the autopilot or the human helmsman has to apply the ship's rudder to hold the correct heading.
And using the rudder causes drag.
Significant drag. Rudder angle is not free. Turning a massive steel rudder creates a huge amount of drag in the water. So the ship is gaining energy from the kite up in the air, but it's losing energy by dragging the rudder in the ocean just to stay straight.
Okay, I have to push back here a bit, though. Are these tech companies just intentionally ignoring the drag to make their efficiency numbers look better for investors? because leaving out 3 whole degrees of physical motion seems like a massive oversight for a professional engineering study.
I wouldn't call it malicious, really. It is just the nature of early-stage modeling in any new technology.
Just getting the basics down first.
Yeah. A single degree of freedom model is a valid first estimate to see if the core concept even generates enough aerodynamic lift to be worth pursuing at all. But as the author states, the industry desperately needs a full 4 degree of freedom analysis to prove those fuel savings aren't totally wiped out by rudder, drag, heel, and leeway.
Right, the real-world stuff.
Exactly. The author anchors this perfectly with a quote. They say, "Otherwise, we are only looking at the pull, not the ship."
Looking at the pull, not the ship.
Okay.
That is a great distillation of the problem.
Ah,
But, having those great numbers on paper assumes the kite pulls straight. What happens when it doesn't?
things get complicated very fast.
Yeah, once we acknowledge that the physical forces are way more complicated than a straight line, we have to look at the human beings tasked with managing those forces. Like if a system requires constant monitoring and steering correction, who is managing that mess when things actually go wrong?
And this brings us to a concept the article calls the 0-200 test, the 2 a.m. test.
The 2 a.m. test.
Yeah. The ultimate proving ground for any shipboard technology is never a sunny afternoon in calm waters with a team of engineers on board. The real test is the middle watch in the dead of night with a skeleton crew.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's paint the picture based on the scenario in the source. It is 2 o'clock in the morning, pitch black outside. The aerokite has been flying perfectly within its limits. The ship is making good time. But then, as happens every single day at sea, the weather suddenly turns bad.
It always does.
Right. A squall rolls in, the wind freshens and changes direction, heavy rain starts hammering the glass windows of the bridge, and the bow of the ship starts plunging violently into heavier waves. And on top of all that, a target on the radar, like a crossing vessel that looked totally harmless 10 minutes ago, suddenly demands immediate attention to avoid a collision.
The author highlights a profoundly true reality about risk at sea here. Severe casualties and collisions rarely begin with one dramatic explosion or a catastrophic mechanical failure.
It's a chain reaction.
Exactly. They begin with 2 or 3 totally ordinary things arriving at the exact same time. The rain, the wind shift, and a crossing vessel.
In that chaotic moment, the officer of the watch standing on the bridge does not care about saving 5% on the company's fuel bill.
No, not at all.
They're flooded with cognitive load. They need to know immediately, can they alter the ship's course to avoid the radar target? Or are they physically restricted by the massive kite pulling them forward? Do they have to wait for a 15-minute automated drone recovery sequence to finish before they can even turn the wheel?
Right.
And who even has the legal authority to cut the tether and lose a multi-million-dollar drone if they absolutely have to?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is fundamentally about cognitive load and human bandwidth. Recovery of this giant drone in bad weather is where the crew's confidence will really be tested.
Because it's not a small piece of equipment.
No, it's massive. Is the recovery fully automatic, or does it demand crew intervention? If you need deck crew to physically secure the drone once it lands on the platform, how much notice do they need at 2:00 a.m.?
Good point. They have to wake up and get out there.
Yeah. And more importantly, is it even safe to send human beings out onto a pitch-black, wet, violently pitching forecastle in the exact same heavy weather that triggered the emergency recovery in the first place?
It sounds absolutely terrifying for a tired deck crew. I mean, you've got this massive rigid wing descending from the sky right in front of the bridge windows. The tether is still live and under immense tension, just whipping around.
It's incredibly dangerous.
And the ship might be forced to hold a specific heading straight into the crashing waves just to give the drone a safe landing angle. If this giant kite is dropping down and blocking the bridge's forward visibility right when the officer is trying to track a crossing vessel on the radar, I mean, that is a literal nightmare.
It is. The author insists that a kite system that is only safe during a quiet daytime watch fundamentally fails the shipboard test. It must remain manageable when the watch becomes overwhelmed.
It has to work when things go wrong.
Exactly. The emergency procedures cannot be something the officer of the watch is trying to figure out by reading a manual on the fly, while collision alarms are literally blaring in their ears.
And if the master of the ship is trying to figure out if they have the authority to cut a multi-ton drone loose in a storm, they can't rely on guesswork. There has to be a legal framework for that, right?
It absolutely has to be.
Because human panic at 2 in the morning is so incredibly dangerous, the global maritime industry relies on heavily standardized, incredibly strict rulebooks. How on earth does an airborne flying drone fit into international traffic laws that were written specifically for floating steel hulls?
Well, it creates a major bureaucratic and regulatory collision. The article raises the call regs question.
Call regs.
Yeah, call regs are the international regulations for preventing collisions at sea. They are basically the universal traffic laws of the ocean. Normally, a merchant ship using its engine is classified simply as a power-driven vessel, even if a kite is helping pull it. But what happens during that critical launch or recovery phase?
Right. When the kite is passing through the forward sector, the tether is active, and the ship is forced to hold its heading to retrieve the drone safely. Like they can't just swerve out of the way of another boat.
Hmm.
So does the ship's legal status change?
That's the million-dollar question. Does the vessel suddenly become restricted in her ability to maneuver or ram under international law?
Right.
Right. And this is not a trivial bureaucratic detail. If a ship is legally classified as ram, other vessels are obligated by law to get out of its way.
Well, they just have to move.
Exactly. But this classification cannot just be left up to a shipmaster's personal interpretation in the middle of a crowded shipping lane. Should the ship's automatic identification system, the transponder that broadcasts its status to other ships, show a different category?
Do regulators need to invent a brand new legal category just for tethered airborne propulsion?
They might have to.
The sheer amount of safety and legal scaffolding required just to fly a kite off a commercial boat is staggering when you lay it all out like this. And that leads directly to the title of the article itself, the missing manual.
Right, the Safety Management System, or SMS. This is the legally binding manual that dictates how a specific ship is operated.
The rule book for that exact boat.
Exactly. The DeepDraft author argues that before any drone takes flight, this manual must define the exact operating envelope in plain language that actually works for the crew on board.
No vague engineering terms.
No. It needs hard limits for wind speed, for sudden gusts, for sea state, and vessel motion. It needs defined limits for visibility, for traffic density around the ship, and for the closest point of approach, which is basically the safety bubble around the ship when dealing with other vessels.
And the manual has to plan for the absolute worst-case scenario too,
Yeah.
right? Like a snap tether. The article points out that a tension tether holding an airborne drone is not normal deck equipment.
No, it's far more dangerous.
If that line parts under the strain of a heavy wind gust, it creates a deadly snapback hazard on the deck. Like a heavy synthetic cable under immense tension doesn't just drop to the floor when it breaks. It whips back with the kinetic force of a car crash.
It's explosive.
It can be completely lethal to the crew.
And the hazard doesn't stop at the deck either. If a large section of that snapped line falls into the water and gets dragged under the ship's hull, it becomes a severe propulsion risk.
Oh, because of the propellers.
Right. It could easily foul the ship's propellers or get sucked into the thrusters, and that leaves a 75,000-ton vessel completely dead in the water during a storm.
Which is the worst possible outcome.
Exactly. The manual has to define the exact alarms, the bridge action, the deck exclusion zones to keep crew safe, and the emergency recovery methods for this exact failure.
To be fair to the companies developing this, the article does mention that class societies, the organizations that certify ship safety, like DNV and Lloyd's Register, they are actively working on these frameworks for wind-assisted propulsion systems.
They are, yes.
And we should note that the seeing system by Airseas has already done some pioneering installation work on a vessel called the Ville de Bordeaux to build this kind of operational confidence. So the industry is trying to build the scaffolding.
They are definitely making progress. But the author makes a critical point here. Class approval from DNV or Lloyd's cannot just be a closing formality where they hand over a certificate and say, good luck.
It has to mean something on the water.
Right. The shipping company's internal safety management system and the shipmaster's absolute, unquestioned authority to abort a launch or refuse deployment, that must remain paramount. This whole system enters the daily watchkeeping routine. It demands new planned maintenance systems, new emergency records, new drills, and role-specific training for every single crew member on board.
It is so easy to forget that every new layer of green technology compliance, whether it's an exhaust gas scrubber, a complex ballast water treatment system, or an airborne drone, they all look fantastic on a polished PowerPoint presentation in a corporate office.
Yeah, they always look perfect on paper.
Right. They promise a cleaner future. But on board the actual ship, they arrive as alarms. They arrive as extra maintenance hours, missing spare parts, mandatory training sessions, and breakdowns. They arrive as extra work for a crew that is already stretched incredibly thin.
And that is the crucial blind spot in shoreside discussions that the DeepDraft desk is trying to expose here. Aerokite systems absolutely have a highly credible technical argument.
Reaching those high winds makes sense.
Exactly. Reaching stronger winds at higher altitudes without cluttering the deck with massive, heavy fixed sails is a brilliant engineering concept. It offers measurable fuel savings right now without waiting decades for a global alternative green fuel supply chain to mature.
Yeah, which could take forever.
Right. But by creating a new operating layer, hundreds of feet in the sky, governed by tension, tethers, and complex automation, they have fundamentally changed the test.
The test is no longer just can the drone fly and pull the ship.
Exactly. The industry should not just be asking if the one-dimensional model shows a fuel saving. They need to ask if the system can be safely launched, recovered, isolated, audited, and fundamentally understood by the crew during a chaotic winter voyage. The promise of the technology is lift. But the ultimate test of the technology is control.
Control. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Whether you work in maritime technology, whether you design software interfaces, or whether you are just managing a team in a corporate office, this source material is a masterclass in operational reality.
It really is applicable anywhere.
Yeah. We started this deep dive looking at a very shiny claim, a potential 10% fuel saving using an autonomous drone. But we journeyed all the way down into the gritty reality of hydrodynamic rudder drag, deadly snapback zones, and exhausted officers managing radar panics at 2 a.m.
The real world is messy.
Exactly. It is a powerful reminder that technical innovation means absolutely nothing if it is not safely operational for the end user in their most stressful moments.
It forces a massive shift in perspective regarding how we interact with the ocean, too. This raises an important question, something that builds on the regulatory headaches we discussed with the call regs.
Oh, yeah.
For centuries, the rules of the sea have been entirely dictated by what happens in the water.
Right. Hull sizes, wakes, drafts.
Exactly. The laws govern floating hulls and drafts. But if merchant ships start pulling themselves across the oceans with autonomous drones flying hundreds of feet in the air, are we eventually going to have to rewrite the fundamental laws of the ocean to include the sky? Something to think about.
Wow. The laws of the ocean, including the sky. We started by looking out at that 75,000-ton tanker, marveling at the giant kite pulling it through the clouds. But the next time you picture that ship, look a little closer at the bridge. Look at the crew inside, staring at the weather radar, holding the remote control, trying to balance the demands of the weather, the law, and the technology, because that is where the real future of green shipping will be decided. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. We will catch you next time.